Good evening and welcome to this meeting of Oxford City Council Cabinet taking place here in the Town Hall on, yes, I'll check the date, Wednesday the 11th of February. So welcome all. I don't believe we've got any apologies for absence, but let me check. No, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope, not seeing any. So minutes of the previous meeting that took place on Wednesday, the 21st of January. Has anyone got any issues they want to raise on the on those minutes, or are we happy to agree them as an accurate record? Fantastic, thanks very much. We have no addresses by members of the public. We have no council addresses on items for decision on the cabinet agenda, but I do believe we have a council address on neighbourhood issues. I thought it was on neighbourhood issues.
There's one for the one previous as well.
Oh, is there? Who's that from then?
Councillor.
Oh, okay, so I thought it was on the local plan.
So there's one on there's two on neighbourhood issues and one on an item decision.
Okay, fine. So Councillor Henwood, perhaps you come forward and explain what it is that you're actually talking to us about, because I'm unclear. Could you clarify what you're talking about, please? Yes, can you?
So I had two things I wanted to raise. One was the Littlemore Community Centre roof. However, I've been talking with officers and that issue is resolved. So we do have a repair date. So I would like to talk to Cabinet on the inclusion of Littlemore as a local centre. The initial assessment appears to have missed key frontage along Stanley Lane West, Ledgers Way, the Kassam Stadium and the View. When these are included, the scale and function of Littlemore are much more clearer and more comparable to other designated local centres. Littlemore is strategically located. It sits close to Cowley Centre and stands to benefit from the proposed Cowley branch line. It is near significant employment areas, including R&D sites and a major community asset such as the Kassam Stadium. These connections strengthen its role as a sustainable local hub. The area promotes healthy lifestyles. Littlemore has 4 allotment sites, important green spaces, and established cycling routes running parallel to Grenoble Road and the A34. County plans to include improvements to cycling and pedestrian infrastructure along the Oxford Road, Sanford Road, and St Nicholas Road will be actioned this year. The new pharmacy further supports access to essential services within the walking and cycling distance. When compared with Blackbird Leeds, which has less frontage, yet holds local centre status, it is reasonable to question why Littlemore should not be recognised in the same way. Designating Littlemore as a local centre would not be symbolic. It would help guide investment, strengthen grant applications, and provide clearer planning protection for shops and services. Most importantly, it would recognise the role Littlemore already plays and support its long-term sustainability. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henwood. So that item was, I had understood, to be raised under council addresses on neighbourhood issues, because it's not anything that's on the agenda. We discussed the local plan at the last cabinet meeting. So if you had wanted to make any representations in time to have any possibility of putting them into the local plan before it went out for consultation, you've had 3 opportunities: scrutiny, cabinet and council. This is somewhat after the event. I mean, obviously you still have the right to raise it under neighbourhood issues, but did you actually have any issue that you wanted to raise for decision on the cabinet agenda?
No, Chair, only this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But Councillor Hollingsworth, do you want to respond?
Yeah, response for the records. Just to be clear on the process element, we have begun as a council the Regulation 19 consultation on the local plan, and the content of that Regulation 19 consultation version of the local plan is a matter for full council. and full council determined it, including a substantial number of amendments. I'm sure I found it a very fascinating meeting. I appreciate those who are less excited by planning issues than me might have found it ever so slightly less engaging. But it was fully determined by the full council meeting, which was on the 26th of January 2026. And that consultation process has begun. It is underway. On a process point of view, it is not possible for Cabinet to make amendments to the local plan as decided by full council. It's also worth reflecting forwards that should the Regulation 19 consultation go through in the usual process, it will go directly from the consultation to the planning inspector. It will not come back to the council, and it will not be until the public inquiry, the planning inspector's hearings, have been concluded, that it will return complete with advice from the planning inspector, she or he, as to what amendments, if any, will be required in order to make it an acceptable local plan. That's some months away, to put it mildly. So just to be clear also, in terms of this precise issue, following the request of the Scrutiny Committee, where this issue was raised, planning officers reviewed their advice that Littlemore did not meet the specific, and they are specific, it's not a kind of an option, there are specific clear guidance on what is and what is not a local centre, and those are set nationally. And their advice was that Littlemore did not meet those nationally set requirements for the technical term local centre. And this further review confirmed their original judgment, and that was actually circulated to all councillors and to the general public who were interested in the full council meeting on the 26th of January. It was set out in full on pages 25 and 26 of the briefing note and supplementary papers. And that was published, it is publicly available. It was publicly available before the meeting, for the full council meeting on the 26th of January 26. That set of advice, second set of advice, repeating the first set, made clear there are facilities and services in Littlemore, quite rightly, but these are dispersed across a wider area, and they do not form, and this is where the importance of the definition is essential, they do not form enough of a cluster of uses to meet that nationally set requirement of that technical term local centre. It is defined in the NPPF. What we have are a series of active frontages, absolutely, and these can be defined as having neighbourhood significance, but in order to be a local centre, they need to have evidence that they go beyond that, and that does not exist. It is also worth reflecting that existing facilities would be protected and supported by the other policies in the draft local plan, and that local centre status, and this did come up quite repeatedly at scrutiny, local centre status confers precisely no additional benefits whatsoever. It provides no benefits in terms of attracting investment, provides no grants. The absence of the technical local centre designation has no impact on the status or the local pride of a community. I hope that was helpful for Cabinet.
Thank you very much for your detailed response. Thank you, Councillor Henwood. Right, if we move on to back onto the agenda, item 7 is items raised by Cabinet members, and there are none notified. Reports from Scrutiny Committee, I believe we have Jonathan here to talk us through those. So over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Leader. So I first just want to say we've had obviously apologies from Councillor Powell and Councillor Five for not being here this evening. But the committee met on the 3rd of February to consider items that have been requested by the committee, with some thanks going to Phil McGaskill, Nigel Kennedy, Becky Willis, Helen Bishop and Tom Hook for preparing the reports for the committee. And also thanks for Councillor Turner and Councillor Chapman for attending. So the items they reviewed at their last meeting was the debt recovery procedure, AI strategy, notice board updates and the budget review group report. So for the debt recovery procedure, discussions were centred on the use of agents and measures in place to safeguard vulnerable residents. Points were raised on accessibility, such as language barrier and digital exclusion, with one of the recommendations is to include plain language in the recovery letters sent out to individuals, and confidence that enforcement procedures are aligned with the council's policies and the protection of vulnerable residents that partnership with advice centres are maintained. And these are all reflected within the 3 recommendations set out in the supplement, which I note 2 have been approved and 1 has been approved in part.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Did you want to respond at all? I'm looking at you, Ed. Is that your report, the debt recovery one?
Yeah. I mean, we've tabled a response. It's helpful to have the interest. I was glad to be there, and Phil did a very good job covering it off. And yeah, I mean specifically on the point about the wording of letters, we're somewhat hemmed in by the sort of statutory requirements and what can go in a letter. And then there was a bit of a judgment about how beyond that we should lay things out, and whether adding additional sort of documents is helpful or whether it's better to integrate things. But I think we're coming from the same place as scrutiny. And yeah, I mean, the point about advice centres has been clarified.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, back to you.
Thank you. So the other item on the agenda was the AI strategy, and you'll note there are no recommendations for this item. However, the committee is supportive of the approach of the structured strategy and governance arrangements presented and supportive of AI being a tool for efficiency in the council, but not as a replacement for the workforce. Other key points were around the human accountability and the output of AI. Some concerns were raised around safeguards, such as data management and protection. And appreciating that AI is evolving, the committee welcomed that there are plans to develop further training and monitoring the use of AI within the council.
Sorry, thank you very much. And budget review group report.
Thank you. I'll loop it in with the item on notice boards, which at the behest of the committee, a report was produced on what could be done in relation to the management of notice boards, noting some disparity across wards across Oxford from previous discussions. There was a clear view that scrutiny wanted the council to take back the day-to-day running of the notice boards and save for where there are already effective mechanisms in place. There were 2 recommendations as a result of the discussion. One was for Cabinet to consider that the council actively manages and operates the boards as a preferred approach. Given the cost implications to this recommendation, as set out in the briefing note, this recommendation is made alongside the 9 recommendations from the Budget Review Group. But it also notes if this approach is not achievable, the committee then recommends that no further action is taken. And secondly, should it be agreed that council has a hand at managing the boards, then clear guidance should be issued on how they should be managed and used. And I'll note that recommendation was agreed in part.
I'm not entirely sure which cabinet member has responsibility for this, but I note that the, is it? Okay, well, please do briefly respond.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, you can see the response to the recommendation. I mean, we had a good discussion about this. There is a serious issue here that actually the council collectively and its councillors invest significant sums in notice boards and have done in the past. And if we don't look after them properly, it's a waste of money. So we need to find a way to look after them properly. But that doesn't mean that scrutiny can come forward with a budget bid, which is what it effectively was doing here, and ask us to include it and make sure or compel us to include it. They can ask us to include it, but not compel us. So I think it's agreed subject to budget discussion, as the comment says, and we'll have to see how it gets along. All the other budget conversations are going to take place in the next couple of weeks.
Which takes us nicely onto the budget. Oh, Alex, sorry. What?
I love notice boards. It's an interesting thing. I was saying surreptitiously to Nigel, I had a full head of hair when we started talking about notice boards in the Jericho Ward Councillors debates, but my God, it's a saga. I was just going to say, whichever cabinet member it transpires to be, this is a not dissimilar issue to the one about the city centre street furniture and such like, the provision of something as a capital purchase without any preparation for maintenance or replacement of parts or elements, keys loom large with these and so on. Can we just make sure they're integrated? Because it's the same issue. It's when we commission a notice board and we buy one off a peg and it transpires to be a different peg to all the others, it just causes a problem down the line. That was all.
The hope would be that all notice boards would be commissioned through ODS to a standard scale and size. That's what the ambition is. That will streamline the whole process.
Linda, if you must.
Well, just to say, yeah, I mean, it's sort of like what Alex was saying anyway, but I think it's important to put this isn't just an ODS issue because it isn't just about the purchase and the maintenance of the notice boards themselves. What's important is, what's in there. And that's something that our localities team take on board in many areas already. That is part of their job, like putting stuff in the notice boards. In other areas, like in Blackbird Leys, Parish Council is investing in notice boards and, looks after the key holders. So, yeah, I'm not sure it makes sense, to have this as a separate budget bid in the way that it is, for the whole city. I think it's something probably best done on an area basis as part of our locality working.
I
just for the
appreciate
record.
that this is a subject that most councillors, including me, could go on about for quite a long time, but it's quite a small issue in the context of this meeting.
Yeah,
So
okay, fine.
I'm sure we can all happily have lots of conversations about it afterwards, but can we move on to the budget? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So the budget review process concluded following a series of meetings in December and January. The report is provided within your supplementary papers, which sets out the findings of the BRG and the 9 recommendations, plus 1 from scrutiny on notice boards. So some of the recommendations to highlight. On garden waste collection, there was a noted rise in cancellation of this service and some concerns around the affordability, hence a recommendation to freeze the concessionary rate on garden waste and instead raise the proposed standard rate by another 0.2% to preserve the income assumed in the budget. Linked to this is a recommendation to include forms with reason-based tick boxes for residents to fill out when cancelling paid services so that the council is better informed of the reasons behind the decline. Discussions led to the potential offer of a discounted compost bin as means to support residents to manage garden waste on their own premises. This is a recommendation to assess the cost of this. Another key area that was discussed was the correlation between bulky waste collection and fly tipping. Recommendation 4 of the group suggests that HMO licence fees incorporate a sort of levy to cover the disposal of bulky waste to offset some of the costs incurred by the council in clearing fly-tipped items such as mattresses and broken furniture. Second part of this recommendation is that there should be a mechanism where the HMO licensed services notifies ODS of any anticipated end of tenancies, for example, students leaving their HMO accommodation to allow speedy collection of bulky items. Some recommendations relate to more effective use of the council's assets, such as making entry to the Museum of Oxford more attractive by possibly offering a hot drink with each admission, which in the view of the group would have added benefit to the Town Hall Cafe by way of increased footfall, and also a suggestion to offer paying museum customers 10% discount to use in the museum's gift shop. In relation to parking revenue, the group recommended introducing a long stay parking option at park and rides, such as for 1 or of 2 weeks, and to encourage users such as tourists staying for a number of days in the city centre hotels to park outside of the city centre. They suggested for pricing to be set above the standard short stay rates and adjustable if there provides to be a need to manage space taken by long-term users. To note that the Budget Review Group had fewer recommendations this year speaks to the nature of the Council's financial plan and the expected changes to come from local government reorganisation. Members are very grateful to all officers listed within the report who have greatly contributed to the process. Claire Patterson and the finance partners who have consistently attended the meetings, the Climate and Environment and Housing and Homelessness Working Group members for their insights which have helped develop some of the recommendations, and to the members of the Budget Review Group who supported this vital part of the budget setting process. Particular thanks are to Nigel Kennedy, the Chief Finance Officer, for his guidance during this review on what will be his last budget for Oxford City Council ahead of his retirement, and also to Celeste Rose-Lau, the Scrutiny and Governance Advisor, who organised and supported the full process for the Budget Review Group over the past 6 months.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Ed.
Yeah, I mean, I thank the review group as well for its usual detailed and thoughtful probing of the budget. and some interesting recommendations. We've tabled our responses. I don't think me reading out responses to a group of people who've already received them and had the chance to read them will achieve very much. And I'm sure some of them can also and will also be picked up in a budget debate going forward. But when they're picked up, they'll be done so on the basis of the fact that they've been they benefited from the discussion and scrutiny. I think it makes our budget stronger to have these sessions, and I'd also thank the members, indeed officers, that gave generously of their time.
Thanks very much, Ed. And as you say, I'm sure we'll cover some of the territory again later on in the agenda. So thank you very much, Jonathan. We will now, and thank you, please pass on our thanks to Scrutiny for their work, including, as Ed said, the Budget Review Group. We are now on to item 9, which is the Pride in Place programme. And Linda, I'm over to you on this, and Rue is kindly joining us online. So.
Thank you. The government's Pride in Place programme will see £5 billion given to nearly 250 areas across the UK, with each area receiving up to £20 million of funding and support over the next 10 years to make long-term improvements that residents want to see. So it's not surprising that Greater Leeds has been chosen as one of these areas based on the disadvantages it faces across a range of indicators when it comes to education, health, income, etc. There's a pre-approved sort of list of projects that the money can be spent on, which is a fascinating read, and it goes on and on and on. And knowing what I do about the local community, there's so many things there that you can see, that would be massively beneficial to the area and really welcomed by residents, things like the ability to invest in bus services, to improve primary healthcare, to invest in parks and open spaces, support local community groups. I think it's worth noting as well that when we're talking about Greater Leeds, what the government calls Greater Leeds, it's actually 3/4 of our Northfield Brook ward and 1/4 of the Blackbird Lees ward. And I think it's also important to note that, while the funding is really directed on that Greater Leeds area, and what's really important is we listen to the people in that area about how the money needs to be spent, that amount of investment in that local area is going to be beneficial for people living beyond the official boundaries as well across the Lees and probably Littlemore and Cowley and beyond. What's different about this scheme is, despite all the potential projects that we can see, would be beneficial, it's not going to be councillors or the MP that's going to be deciding how this money is spent. It is local people. And the MP Annalisa Dodds and the council are going to be working together to appoint a chair to oversee the programme, and then they'll be working on appointing a neighbourhood board, and that's how decisions will be made going forward on how that money will be spent. We've got the first event, public event, at the end of this month on the Lees on the 28th of February at the Barn, for the public to drop in and find out more about how they can get involved, what being chair or being on the neighbourhood board involves. So yeah, we'll be doing our best to publicise that. And yeah, I'll hand over to Rue to pick up on anything else that I've missed, but really pleased to present this report tonight and really excited about the potential for the Lees.
Thanks, Linda.
So thank you, Councillor Smith. I think the other thing to add in terms of this report is that whilst this is a community-led programme and the community, as Linda says, will be making the decisions, the council does have a role as accountable body, which is sitting behind this report. So this report is to say that we accept that role as accountable body, which will be, to do with managing the funds, how they're distributing and paying and sort of funding the projects at the beginning, as well as the sort of legal responsibilities relating to subsidy control and state aid. And that's certainly the intention at the start of the programme. The programme is over 10 years. I think the government is looking for the neighbourhood boards to become a sort of community-led organisations, and at that point the accountable body role may transfer to them, but at the beginning we will have responsibility for oversight on the programme.
Thanks, Rue. Has anyone got any questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. I mean, I think we've all of us been of what's going on in this programme. But really the real work starts now, I think, in terms of engaging with the community and hearing from them about the next steps. It's obviously very exciting, and it is fantastic to see this investment going on into our local communities, and indeed for them to have the opportunity to spend money in the ways that are most important to them. So if there are no questions and comments, I suggest we move to the recommendations, which are to approve the proposals to accept the money, which feels like an important part of this process, and delegate authority to enter into the memorandum of understanding and make all the necessary arrangements to take it forward and spend it essentially. They're all set out in your papers. Is everyone happy to agree the recommendations? Yeah. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thanks very much, Roo. And thank you for all the work you're doing on this. I know it's a slightly unusual project, but we look forward to seeing some interesting decisions coming forward from it. So item 10 on the agenda is the council tax reduction scheme. And so over to Ed, and I know we've got Laura as well, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much. So by way of reminder for working age households, Susan, this is a scheme which offers council tax reduction for those who are on lower incomes. And it's something which was localised, if memory serves, in the days of the coalition government, and they also cut the funding to local authorities for it. Not a welcome development, and we remain one of a minority of councils, smallish minority, where we say that we want to continue to pay full council tax relief, full council tax reduction for those on the lowest incomes. And we do so because I think sending bills for relatively small amounts of money for those who are on really low incomes brings with it substantial collection costs, but also necessarily very substantial hardship. And, sadly, I represent quite a number of people on a low income, and talking to people about the pressures from their energy bills, some relief is on the horizon there, I know, increasing costs of food shopping and essentials and we don't want to add to their problems. So that's why we've kept to this principle. We did, as Cabinet will recall, uncover some quirks, some glitches in the way the scheme operated last year relating to the treatment of universal credit income, and we made some changes. And after some discussion around the council chamber, we essentially declared our intention to phase in those changes. So where people had benefited by the operation of the scheme not working quite as we expected, we said, well, we will need to, I suppose, make the scheme less generous, but we'll do so over time. The recommendation here is to go for option 2, which is a step in that direction. It does make the income band slightly less generous, but it is still, I think, a very fair scheme. We've also got the appropriate recommendations around the treatment of non-dependent deductions. I think the other thing I'd say is that we've had some good engagement with advice agencies over a lot of this. Partly because of the flows of information, there will be some people who are in substantial need where we simply don't know about the scale of their need. And then they have to get flagged to us manually because we can't pick it up automatically. And so also this report talks about hardship funding, which is available. And if people are in circumstances of hardship, then we do need to know about that and we want to help. And I'm very confident as well the advice agencies will be really good in highlighting such cases to us. Thanks to Laura for the hard work on the report and the consultation. I'd like to move its recommendations.
Thanks very much, Ed. Laura, anything to add?
No, nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, questions, comments? No? Yes, I think everyone's very happy, basically. We are delighted that we are still able to maintain this scheme. And as Ed quite rightly said, big thanks to you, because I appreciate this is not without its complications, as we indeed discovered last year. So I think, the recommendations about moving to sort of gently make some of those changes are very welcome. And we are really pleased to be able to, hopefully, in a second or two, move to the recommendations and support them. So can we indeed recommend to council to agree the changes and to delegate the relevant authority to draft the details of the scheme? Everyone happy? Thank you very much, and thank you, Laura. There you go, that was quite painless. So, thank you, everyone. We are now on to item 11 on the agenda, which is the Air Quality Action Plan. So I'm assuming that's you, Councillor Elton, and I think we have got Pedro online, so.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. So yes, this is the second time this Cabinet has seen the Air Quality Action Plan, and the first was before it went to consultation. It's come back from consultation. It now looks like really fantastic. It's been massively tarted up and looks really good. And you know, the consultation should say was super positive with it's basically most people supporting the contents of it and the recommendations within it. It's probably the last air quality action plan this city produces, as both because as LGR rolls forward, and also because the air quality in the city has got significantly better, and actually we generally might not need one after this the period of this plan ends. So sort of looking back, you know, over the past decade, nitrous oxide levels in the city have fallen by about 50%, with a quarter of that achieved in the envelope of the last plan. We more or less did achieve our 30, as in 30 micrograms per cubic metre by 2025 goal set in the last plan. And in this plan, we have a new one, which is, let me get this right, 20 micrograms per cubic metre by 2030. There we go. So our world in data, so this is a slight thing, but which is an Oxford non-profit, which does sort of data aggregation, sort of global poverty metrics, has a really nice line about when talking about data. It says, the world is awful, the world is much better, and the world can be much better. And actually, it kind of occurred to me that the same can be true of air quality in Oxford. You know, we know from lots of academic work that no amount of air pollution is truly safe. There was a Birmingham University study a few years ago done on Oxford data actually that showed that every 1 microgram per cubic metre increase in NO2 increases asthma hospital admissions by 4%. You know, this is the sort of like the world is awful sort of thing. You know, the world is much better. You know, Oxford is generally much better than it was, and is generally far, far ahead of many other cities in the UK. You know, when I see air quality data from places like, you know, Sheffield and, you know, and it's up in the 70s and 80s, it's genuinely actually kind of horrifying and is just so different to what residents of Oxford experience. And then, yeah, the world can be much better. And Oxford's air quality can be better still, and this is what this Air Quality Action Plan is about. So of particular interest to many will be the list of measures. So a table of these can be found on sort of like page 59. That's of the report, not of the agenda pack, or table 8 in the plan. There's a big sort of list of them. You know, the really big ones here are not in this city's control, will need their own political support and their own consultation processes to deliver. Some of them won't be deliverable, to be clear, I think, and some of them, you know, in the combination with others. You know, some of these in this table have this administration's full support. You know, I won't enumerate all of them, but, you know, Cowley Branch Line and other rail schemes, we're obviously super delighted that that's going forward. Bus service improvement plans, supporting car clubs, EV charging, cycling and walking infrastructure. You know, others, however, to be clear, you know, slightly more difficult. You know, workplace car parking levy, you know, is of minimal air quality benefit anyway. You know, this administration doesn't think it's deliverable. We don't think the Secretary of State would ever sign it off in its current form. Yeah, you know, similarly, expanding the ZEZ expansion with all of the other expanding the ZEZ in the context of all of the other schemes that are going on, we feel doesn't really make that much sense. It's confusing for residents. The pilot, sort of the scheme that we've got very much has delivered, but actually right now we don't see the need to necessarily expand it. And traffic filters, which we shall see following the congestion charge, temporary congestion charge coming to an end when the Botley Road reopens in August. We sort of support if the county council will deign to give exemptions to city residents, basically. So I think sort of coming back to the plan as a whole, I think this is a really fantastic piece of work. It is more or less the work of sort of one man, which is Pedro, who's on the call, who has done genuinely incredibly excellent work here. I'm like super in his debt. Yeah, I hope we can get on and deliver some of the things inside this plan.
Thank you very much, Anna. Pedro, would you like to add some things?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I was about to, but I think Councillor Anna already touched the most kind of important points. Perhaps just to add that on the public consultation responses, that they've demonstrated kind of strong support for this, generally speaking, for this air quality action plan. And 71% of the respondents either agreed or strongly agreed with the newly kind of NO2 annual mean proposed target of 20 micrograms per cubic meter, as mentioned by Councillor Railton. And up to 69% fully endorsed the 4 priority kind of areas of intervention that we've included in the plan. So I would say that overall it was quite positive what we got from public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we'd all also want to endorse Anna's comments about the successes that we've had so far, but also acknowledging the fact that a lot of the measures that are in the action plan are not actually for direct delivery by this council. Although I guess LGR is an example of where, you know, this potentially at least brings together the kind of measuring and the actions in the future for future councils, although also acknowledging the point that Anna was making, which is that there might not need to be a further plan. I think we would all welcome the idea that there wouldn't need to be a further action plan for air quality, because that really is a strong measure of success. And I'm very conscious that on Monday I was listening to a very interesting discussion about negativity bias and the focus that people have on negatives and things that need fixing. And actually, this is quite a success story, and it is a story about actually real improvements having been made. So thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Linda.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Anna and Pedro, for all your work on this. And it's a report I'm very happy to vote for this evening. But I think it is worth just underlining the fact that, you know, this is a report about air quality. And as such, it's right that it evaluates all the measures coming out of the County Council as the Transport, as the Highways Authority, for that impact on air quality. But I think it is worth just underlining, just to be very clear, that in voting for this report this evening, this Cabinet is not endorsing a workplace parking levy for Oxford. We're not endorsing the expansion of the ZEZ. We're not endorsing the current congestion charge, or how the County Council might change that and operate it as a traffic filter scheme in the future. But yes, with that in mind, I'll be happy to vote for it this evening.
Yeah, I think that's, I think Anna was making those points too, but I think absolutely helpful to have that clarification, Linda, so thank you. Anybody else? Alex?
Yeah, I think it's merely a one character thing, but in the covering report, paragraph 20, it refers to the draft local plan, which I touched on in my response to the question from a member earlier on, is currently at regulation 19. I think when we consulted on this policy, it did say local plan 2042. We've changed it. It's now local plan 2045. So it's shifted forward 3 years, because I'm assuming this policy covers 2026 to 2030. It doesn't make the blindest bit of difference, except you might need to change typo. But is there anything in that goes beyond 2045 that you need to pick up?
I suspect that's a question for you, Pedro. So is there anything in the action plan that you would need to reconsider in the light that the local plan's moved its dates?
No. I can perhaps just change it to local plan 2045 in the final text before publication, but no more than that.
Sorry, perfect. Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay, no more questions that I'm seeing or comments. So can we move to the recommendations, which is to approve the adoption of Oxford's Air Quality Action Plan 2026 to 2030? Thank you very much. Thank you. Great. We are now on to the capital strategy. So that will be Councillor Ed Turner, and I believe we have Bill Lewis online. So thank you, Pedro.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. So why am I saying Lord Mayor? It's not council meeting.
Definitely not
I'm
the Lord
practicing,
Mayor.
yeah. One day, Susan, one day. Thanks, Susan. So we'll take, this is a recommendation to council and can be debated there. We set out a capital strategy about our management of the capital programme. I think it is a useful document, and there's a perpetual challenge in delivering the capital programme. Clearly, capital programmes do slip, it's in the nature of it. And many items of slippage are unavoidable, but some of them are avoidable. I think we've got better at avoiding items of slippage where that's not where that's possible over time, and that's partly because of good processes, sound processes about the design of schemes, having a pipeline rather than simply sticking everything in. I think it requires a bit of restraint by members and officers. It requires bearing down on optimism bias, and I think our capital strategy served us well. There's any changes in this document compared to the current one are minor, to bring it in line with current policies and so on, but it serves us well, and I'd like to commend it to Cabinet to go forward to Council.
Thanks very much, Ed. And as you rightly said, on the various different budget reports, we tend to reserve most of the debate for council, but has anyone got any questions that they wish to ask? I am not seeing any, in which case, sorry, Bill, I forgot to say, did you want to add anything?
No, Chair. No, I mean, the report, as Councillor Turner's already said, is very much like previous years, but linking to new versions of various other strategies that we've got, etc. So it's just an update and roll forward.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Bill. In which case, can we move to the recommendations, which are to recommend that council approves the capital strategy? So those in favour? Thank you very much. Brilliant. So we now move on to the Treasury Management Strategy, and we have Ed again and Bill and Ryan. So I don't know if Ryan's here.
We'll be able to cover it off, I think, Susan. Yeah, this is the Treasury Management Strategy. Again, a largely unchanged document compared to this year. It's an important one, setting out our approach to borrowing, our approach to investment, and steering, importantly, our appetite to risk. Sometimes there's a balance between risk and reward. You can see updates on the different types of council investment. Increasingly as well, the nature of our work is such that we can borrow internally. That means we've got less investment to make, but nonetheless, it's good to have the strategy in place. You'll also see the environmental policy, EIG policy, if you like, towards the back, ESG policy towards the back, environmental social governance policy, and the ethical investment policy, which is part of it. So we're pleased to include those elements as well. As I say, barring updates around technical and regulatory change, there isn't a lot here which has moved, but I would like us to endorse it to go forward to council.
Thank you, Ed. Bill, anything to add?
Not really, Chair. I mean, it's a technical document to some extent. It ties in with the budget, and it really sort of sets down what officers can do in regards to any borrowing and any investment. As Councillor Turner's already said, we're tending to do a lot of internal borrowing, which generally is the HRA borrowing from the general fund, so that we don't have to take more expensive external borrowing. That may change going forwards depending on interest rates, but at the moment that runs our level of investments down, so that side of it has got less, and it's more about kind of managing cash flows and deciding when we need to borrow in order to maintain those cash flows. But other than that, it's a sort of technical document that we have to put through to council that gets the kind of way that council deals with minimum revenue provision and the borrowing strategies, etc., all approved by full council.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions or comments? Choi.
Thank you very much. I've been following the Treasury management for a long time. I do ask questions, both on the cabinet and in my Labour group, deliberately saying what is going to happen to the investment. I can now review why I do ask those questions, because of how we have looked after our Treasury management. That's a topic close to me. I've followed it for the last 14 years, and I'm happy what we have achieved. I'm going to say something about the transparent investment prioritization. So the council investment hierarchy: first, security first, liquidity second, yield third, is clearly articulated, showing a disciplined and responsible Treasury approach. And I hope when this council is taken over, or we go to Greater Oxfordshire, this approach will be taken. We have learned lessons when we lost some money, a few of it in the Iceland. We have improved on this, and thank you very much for the team and to Ed as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Choi. Ed, do you want to?
No, very briefly. I mean, they're interesting reflections, Choi, and I think you're right. Discipline and responsibility are Bill's middle names. He's got two of them. Just on the sort of lessons when things have gone wrong, and you're right, I think you go into things with your eyes open and funds can go up, swears down. But also there's a risk in overreacting, actually. And with all of these things, I've gone back and I've worked out what would have happened if we stuck the money in the bank rather than alternatives which didn't look so good. What if we'd been really, really risk averse? And actually we'd have been substantially worse off. So there's also something there. At the moment, we're in a place where we can do the internal borrowing and these dilemmas are less acute. But if you end up in a position where you do have money to invest and you say anything other than, a very low rate of interest, but complete security is not on, then you will get your money back, but you will actually be missing out on the return to the taxpayer as well. Sometimes it's doing social good, which is another aspect of this. So thanks, Choi, for the reflections. And hopefully people will vote for it. You will, that's good.
Bill, do you want to add anything?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, well, as I said earlier, these are ultimately mainly for debate at council. So everyone happy to agree the recommendation to recommend it to council? So those in favour, thank you very much. I switched my microphone off. We're now on to item 14, which is, thank you very much, Bill. We are now on to item 14, which is the long leasehold disposal of 16 to 17 Turl Street. I just wanted to flag to Cabinet that there are confidential reports related to this, so I just need to check that no one wants to raise any issues on the confidential reports. No, that was the right answer. Thank you. Over to Ed, and I think we're also joined by both Dan Bond and Emma Gubbins. So thank you both.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to thank the officers on this one. Actually, we're managing our property portfolio in a really active way, and in this case, this is the old Turl Street kitchen building. It's a really tricky building. Other schemes have been, other potential leases have been looked at, but it hasn't worked out. I think that may well be just due to the complexity of the building and the types of works that have to go on there. And a long leasehold disposal of the type which has been negotiated provides, in our view, the best return to the council. Clearly, there's a good deal of commercial sensitivity with such transactions, which is why there's a substantial confidential appendix. But I feel confident that having reviewed it, Cabinet members will want to endorse the recommendations in the main report. These are important assets for the city. Clearly, in reaching a judgment on the long lease being awarded of an asset like this, we look at the appropriateness of the use, but we also need simply to generate a return on the city's commercial investments. And I feel confident with this recommendation, we're hitting the sweet spot. So I'd like to commend it to Cabinet.
Here. Emma, Dan, did you want to add anything?
No, Chair.
Yeah, nothing from me, thank you.
And has anyone got any questions? I mean, it feels like pretty much a no-brainer to me, but I'm not seeing any questions or comments. So can we move to the recommendations and agree the disposal of the long leasehold interest as set out in the report and delegate authority as required to make sure that it actually happens? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Emma and Dan. Much appreciated, and you know, this seems like a really good future for this property. So thank you very much for that. We are now on to procurement of a new HR and payroll system. I believe that's you, Nigel, and I can see we've been joined by Gail online. So thank you.
We have indeed been joined by Gail, so I'm sure she will answer any very, very specific questions about this. This is pretty straightforward, really. I mean, we need to start a process of procuring a new HR and payroll management system for the council and also for ODS who use it as well. The current system came into being in 2018. The contract runs for a maximum of 10 years. So by 2028, we will have reached the end of the road. We can't just carry on extending it. And also, actually, a system you've procured in 2018 is unlikely to be fit for purpose in 2028. So this is to get the ship out of the harbour, basically, and to start the process. As the paper makes clear, once the process has landed on a company who can supply this system, then all the details, the costs, the risks, etc., will come to the Cabinet in a further paper. So this is just the start of the process, basically. Don't think we really need to say very much more than this, except the other point to make is that we will have expended very little money indeed by the time we know the outcome of the LGR process. Now, obviously, if the LGR process goes one way, then you would frankly want to carry on this process, because if it was the Greater Oxford model, that's the logic of it. If it was one of the other two models, then I think we would put a pause on the process and see what to do next. So we're not committing ourselves to lots of money without taking that into account. There are checks and balances in this process and hurdles and timetables to be implemented, which will make sure we don't do that. So I'm comfortable with the proposal, and I recommend it to the Cabinet and to everybody else.
Thanks very much, Nigel. Gail, did you want to add anything?
No, nothing to add, other than we built in flexibility around LGR. My apologies, was that for Ed or for Steph?
Sorry, that completely did my head in, because I was looking at Gail and her mouth wasn't moving and there was sound coming out. So,
I'm so sorry, Chair.
No, it's completely fine. Thank you very much, Steph. I'm apologising to you for not having called on you as well, but thank you. That was just really strange. So you've not got any comment. Gail, have you got any comment?
No, just obviously we're doing this process with LGR on the horizon, so we're taking that into account fully.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions or comments? Alex, yeah.
Yes, and it's not for Gail or Steph, or indeed, well, maybe isn't for Nigel a little bit. I think the context of this with local government reorganisation and the fact that our preferred option is being driven by, to some extent, by those circumstances, quite rightly, and I completely agree with the recommendation. And clearly, we will have a sequence of these decisions, a series of processes, whatever it might be. And so I'm kind of looking at the leader of the council and the chief executive, I'm guessing, at this point, and anyone else who feels thoughtful on this. At what point do we start sort of drawing that together in a a brief statement of principles we will stick to. I think Nigel's absolutely right, and the team are absolutely right about this one. Is it sensible to start, as we get closer to local government reorganisation, setting out something which just gives a little bit of context for the authority and indeed our wholly owned companies, which of course just as impacted by this as a whole, or would it be sensible to just hold off setting out those kinds of principles because it might be actually unhelpful until we're more certain? So that's quite a it's like the black swans question. That is, it's kind of like, what are the unknown unknowns?
Caroline, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I think, as you can see from this report, we're already applying that sort of sense to our discussions and decision making. I think obviously we are balancing the need to make sure that we are continuing with work which is needed for the next couple of years, but also may be needed in a future scenario. So, but in answer to your question about a framework or guiding principles, I mean, I think we have at the moment principles which we apply to ask ourselves questions when we are looking at things like procurement to check whether the decision is sensible to be made before, and as in this case, making sure we've got gateways that we can apply to that. I think it is a little early to give the clarity that we're probably all wanting. To some extent, I think that will become clearer after we have the decision in June or July. But there will be a process which will evolve over the transition period, which will culminate in quite a formal set of agreements. And in the meantime, I think we need to be, applying this as a rule of common sense as we're going through. So we are already having those conversations, for example, in discussion of our business plan and our discussions with ODS. Emma, would you want to add anything to that? I think I've covered it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Caroline. So any further questions or comments on this report? Not seeing any. Okay, so can we approve the initiation of the process and note the further recommendations and agree them? So everyone happy? Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Steph and Gail. So we are now on to the biggie, the medium-term financial strategy. Nigel and Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So as you noted earlier, we tend not to speechify in this gathering, but and we'll leave that for the full council meeting. I'll have one reflection on that at the end. But just a couple of points. I mean, one is clearly we have now received our funding settlement. The government left it late. And what I always used to do was grumble a lot about the lateness of the settlement. They left it late in December, and therefore we couldn't really factor things into our planning as we wanted. But then they did have the decency to offer what on balance is a much better position. So compared to our assessment of what was likely to happen, an additional £4.7 million we projected over the 4 years. And that was very welcome, and it was a welcome departure in my mind from the austerity that had been imposed on us by the preceding governments. We were concerned there might be changes in the final settlement. In fact, the final settlement has also proven beneficial to us. So we understand that we will be receiving quite significant amounts of additional funding in relation to homelessness and particularly supported accommodation. That's an issue we've been lobbying hard on. We don't yet have the full details. It is, and when we do, I think, we will share the news appropriately and clarify people who are interested what we can spend that on. And it's possible that might be reflected in some further administration amendments to the budget that we bring along, if it makes sense to put things in the budget already. But, that's something for the council meeting, but to highlight that good news could be coming through. What we've done, I think, as an administration, Susan, is reflect on where best to put the additional funds that have been released. I think the government expects visible change and change which reflects people's priorities. Unfortunately, we have a very good sort of resident citizen survey that we can draw on there. And often it's the sort of unsung parts of local government that we're asked to prioritise. So things like action on fly tipping, action on antisocial behaviour, making sure that, you know, roads are properly gritted, that sort of thing. And so, you know, there may not be a great deal of kind of glamour and razzmatazz to a lot of the changes we're suggesting, but they're really important. And I think that the biggest headline change which you'll see is restoring collections of bulky items of waste, which I think will help people at a time of cost of living pressures, people who also find themselves inconvenienced by reduced access to Redbridge tip. And, you know, there's no excuse at all for fly tipping, but, you know, I hope this helps as well. And then coupled with that, real investment in tackling antisocial behaviour and crime. And as I say, I think environmental crime is a really important part of that. It's the sort of thing that really drags communities down. The gritting, we're going to resource properly, a bit of a false start this year, if I'm honest, to make sure we can grit cycle lanes, and that will be beneficial. And then there are a number of other smaller elements which I think will be drawn out in the budget debate at council. A couple of other changes of a sort of more technical nature, which are highlighted in the document. I don't think it's going to be useful to go through all of those, but you know, it'll be fully debated. My two final points. I mean, I think the officer work on this has been really excellent. And particularly with very late arrival of key information from government, and officers have worked very hard and collaboratively on that, and I'd really thank them. And we will, I know, in the budget debate, pay tribute to Nigel. And we know Nigel is going through his last budget process with us, but he's done, given great service in this on future occasion, on previous occasions. The other thing is just actually about the approach at the council meeting. I thought the local plan debate was a mixture. There were some thoughtful, helpful, well-timed amendments. And then there was a fiasco when somebody turned up with amendments at the last minute and caused all sorts of trouble. And I'd hope lessons have been learned. But unfortunately, the same councillor pitched up tonight, a month late, with representations. That is anathema to sound financial planning and actually doesn't achieve anything for your residents. So, you know, my request to opposition groups is if they want to amend our budget, and I don't know why they'd want to, because it's such a good budget, but if they do, you know, my door is open, my virtual door, if they would like to talk about it. I think one's already, invited himself in, which is fine. They're also, welcome to table their own amendments for debate, but please do so in cooperation with the officers, in the kind of seriousness that the process deserves. You know, launching showboats at the last minute to make political points in the process is a bit pathetic, and I hope we don't see it through the budget process, Susan. So, if anyone's listening, I hope they take that on board.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Nigel.
Yeah, I think I should say a couple of words actually, as I said, our last budget, and the government probably are aware of that actually, given all the changes that have been made actually. I mean, I do herald the 3-year settlement actually. That's really good for financial planning basically, and puts all local authorities in a good position going forward. But as Ed says, it's off the back of many late changes actually. You know, we were setting up our consultation budget before we had the provisional settlement. We received the final settlement only recently. 3 days before that, they announced massive changes around those local authorities that were in business rates pools. Unfortunately, we never have been in a pool basically, so we weren't affected. And then only yesterday, as Ed says, basically we got an additional £4 million. The other one as well, but basically just to pick up is just note the changes around the movement to formula rents for council house rents. That's something which we've been sort of lobbying hard basically for many a year, and it's good again that the government have recognised that, albeit again another late addition. And enabling us to bring that in from 27-28 actually. So there's a lot to be good about in here basically. But say it would have been better if it was on time. I think the other thing to say, whilst it may look an overall good financial settlement, just to remind us all that in the paper, we actually got 0% increase between 25/6 and 26/7. That's better than some authorities, and I never thought I'd be saying I would welcome a 0% increase, but that's better than some authorities. And I suppose the increase of 4.7 million basically between consultation budget and the actual basically, which is 2.7 million over the 3-year settlement period, was basically down to probably my pessimism, but that is against 114 million pounds of core spending power over that period. So not a bad margin of error, I think, especially in the face of it. As Ed says, there's a few changes we've made, largely around car parks and some other things which are reflected in the reports. And one other point to make that there will be no formation of the North Oxfordshire business rate pool for this financial year. The new methodology for allocation of business rates doesn't make that financially attractive, and therefore the City Council will no longer be in the business rates distributing group, which is, you might recall, we were always outside the pool, but that will no longer apply going forward, actually. And again, that's mentioned in the report. But yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And obviously, we will properly thank you at council. But yeah, I mean, we really do appreciate the huge amount of work, particularly this year, and how late it was. I think, however, it feels a little churlish to be complaining too much when one of the reasons it was so late was because it was so complicated this year, because it was a 3-year settlement, which is what local government, including us, have been asking for a very long time. So I think we absolutely do welcome that. I do completely recognise, though, that it was very, very late. And I think the other thing to say is, yes, there have been a lot of changes, but I does feel that that's because the government has listened to a lot of representations that have been made, including ultimately about the pooled business rates. A little late in the day, that one, but I'm particularly happy to hear about the changes that have come late, but really importantly on homelessness, because we were making very strong representations that we didn't really feel that was adequate. And it's really good news that government have recognised that and given us additional allocation to help us deal with that really significant problem. So I mean, I think bluntly that it feels like we've finally got the start of a budget which will actually help us to restore pride in Oxford after years of austerity. So I'm really pleased about that. Any questions or further comments? I'm not seeing any, and as has already been said, we generally save the comments for council. So that being the case, can we note the report and approve the report to go to council, noting all the recommendations that's laid out in it? Everyone happy to agree them? Thank you very much. That leaves us with one final report, which is the award of contract for the provision of Microsoft Enterprise licensing. And that is you, Nigel, and I think
Rocco is also on the line.
Patiently been waiting online, so thank you.
He's the author of the report on this. This is, again, pretty straightforward. I mean, obviously, the council can't operate without software licenses. They're becoming increasingly important to the way we do business. So we're getting to the place now where we've got to begin a procurement of a new 3-year contract for them, for Microsoft Enterprise software licensing. And we will do that by working through what's called the Crown Commercial Service Framework. This is quite an obscure area, but in a nutshell, there are various frameworks that have been approved for public services to use, like local government, and they have a lot of advantages rather than just going off straight into the open market, because the suppliers are vetted, there's due diligence done upon them, they're able to buy licenses in bulk and therefore get value for money for those who buy from them. They're like the middleman, if you like, in the story, and that's why we do this. And also it speeds up the process, because if you had to go off and do it from scratch yourself, it would take your whole procurement process a lot longer and be far more expensive. So that's the background to the how. You can see the value of the contract there would be up to 1.8 million with additional allowance of 400,000 over 3 years for inflationary uplifts, etc., etc. Why 3 years? I could hear somebody asking me the question when Oxford City Council won't exist in its own right after 2028. Well, we don't want a cliff face here. I mean, the last thing we want is a cliff face on the 1st of May 2028 when new local authority comes into being and it suddenly finds it has got any Microsoft licenses to work with. That would not be a good place. So it's a sort of sensible, pragmatic view here on the time frame, and I think it just speaks for itself really, and it's just common sense. So I ask for your support. Thank you, and I'm sure Rocco will answer the more technical questions around it.
Thank you, Nigel. Rocco, over to you.
Just to echo, good evening, councillors and colleagues. Just to echo what Nigel said, sensible choice. Microsoft is the de facto standard across all of the authorities in Oxfordshire, and it is on a per user basis. So regardless of where we land in a year or so's time, we are going to need the same volume of licenses regardless. So to Nigel's point there, doing it for 3 years gives us the additional advantage of a significant discount compared to doing it for 1 year alone, and it avoids a cliff edge. So we are not buying something that will not be required in the future anyway. So I think that's a good thing. Technically, the only issues are that this licensing, as per the last 2 years, and more so following on from last year, includes all of the cybersecurity licenses that we require. More so, we've been able to agree and negotiate some advantageous licensing models, which will allow us to include Teams telephony free of charge, and also some more proactive cybersecurity licenses included in the bundle that we're getting. So we're enhancing our security stature and improving our telephony as we go along as well.
Sounds very encouraging. Thank you, Rocco. Any questions or comments? No, says Lubna. Right, okay. I think I get the sense people want to move to the recommendations. So can we approve the procurement and the initial contract and delegate the relevant authorities? Everyone happy to support that? Thank you very much. Fantastic. Therefore, thank you very much, Rocco. Thank you for all your work on this. It therefore only leaves for. My goodness, I can't talk now. It's just left to me to remind you that the date of the next meeting is the 18th of March, is what I was trying to say. So thank you all very much, and I close the meeting.